In the late 1600s, wigs suddenly exploded in popularity among Europe's elite. Kings, nobles, wealthy merchants, everyone wanted to wear these big, fluffy, powdered monstrosities. But the reason was far from glamorous. France's King Louis started balding early, likely from stress, illness, and poor hygiene. Instead of accepting it, he covered it up with a wig. His son, Louis XIV, copied him. And when the King of France does something, everyone follows. But then another factor made wigs explode across Europe: syphilis. Yes, the disease. Syphilis was spreading uncontrollably in the 1600s. One of the symptoms, severe hair loss. So elites, especially men, began wearing wigs to hide the bald patches caused by the disease. Over time, wigs became a symbol of wealth, power, and status, even though the trend began because of a sickness that no one wanted to admit. Now let's talk about what these wigs were actually made from. Forget modern wigs made from treated clean fibers. 17th-century wigs were a horror show. They were often constructed from horsehair, stiff and full of dirt; goat hair, which smelled terrible when wet; yak hair, imported but rarely clean; and yes, human hair, often bought from peasants and even orphanages. Most of this hair was unwashed. It came with sweat, lice, oils, and sometimes even scabs. Wig makers tried to boil and bleach it, but hygiene standards were nowhere near today's. By the time a wig reached a rich buyer, it already had a history you definitely wouldn't want near your head. To make the wigs white and fashionable, people used powder. But this powder wasn't fancy makeup. It was usually ground flour, starch, chalk, or even powdered gypsum. Sometimes they mixed in animal fat so the powder would stick better. You know what that means: rats and insects. People were literally walking around with flour in their hair. Rodents didn't care if you were a noble. They smelled food. Here's the part where things really go downhill. People did not wash their wigs. Why? Because washing ruined the style, flattened the curls, and messed up the powder. Instead, they sprayed perfume directly onto the wig to hide the smell. But no amount of perfume could cover up the reality. Those wigs were sweaty, dusty, and full of bacteria. Let's talk lice. Wigs were infested, completely infested. Lice laid eggs in the curls, lived deep in the fabric, and multiplied non-stop. People were so used to this that they invented wig scratchers, long sticks they could slide under the wig to scratch their scalp without removing the whole thing. Imagine sitting at a royal dinner table and seeing nobles casually poking sticks under their hair. When a wig got too dirty, too smelly, or too full of insects, people didn't clean it themselves. They sent it to the local wig dresser. The wig dresser would boil the wig, recurl it with heated irons, powder it again, perfume it, and send it back, even if it still had lice eggs inside. It wasn't about hygiene. It was about appearance, as if lice weren't bad enough. Here's a little-known fact that takes the horror to another level. Some people actually put small chunks of raw meat inside their wigs. Yes, meat. They believed that if they placed meat near the scalp, the insects crawling inside the wig would be attracted to the meat instead of biting their heads. Basically, it acted like a primitive bait trap, feeding the lice so they wouldn't feast on the wearer. The result: wigs that didn't just smell like sweat and powder. They also carried the stench of old, decaying meat mixed with insects feeding on it. Some wig dressers even reported pulling out wigs filled with maggots because the meat had rotted inside the curls. So yes, people literally wore rotting meat on their heads to survive the lice problem. If that doesn't officially make powdered wigs the most disgusting fashion trend in history, nothing will. Good wigs were unbelievably expensive. Some cost more than a poor person's yearly income. That's why rich elites own multiple wigs: formal wigs, everyday wigs, court wigs, military wigs. The more ridiculous the wig, the higher your status. So how did this grotesque fashion finally end? 3 reasons. Rising hygiene awareness, changing fashion in the early 1800s, a little something called the French Revolution. When France's elites literally lost their heads, people wanted nothing to do with their powdered, lice-filled wig culture. Short, natural hair became the new trend. By the mid-1800s, wigs were officially dead. So next time you see a classy 18th century portrait, remember, behind those elegant curls was a cocktail of sweat, animal hair, flour, lice, perfume, and a whole lot of denial. Fashion may change, but history's disgusting trends stay unforgettable.